in a crisp morning in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where the mist clings to the pines like a secret waiting to be told. Emily, a former big-shot attorney turned wildlife photographer, steps onto her cabin's porch, coffee in hand, when she spots it. A sleek, wild bobcat, its amber eyes locking onto hers. This isn't just any animal. It's a creature of the wild, lean and hungry as winter creeps closer. Her heart skips a beat, not from fear, but from awe. This bobcat's ribs are showing, and Emily can't look away. Moved by compassion, she starts leaving scraps of food at the forest's edge, careful not to spook the wary creature. Day by day, a quiet dance of trust begins, each step cautious, each moment a whisper of a deeper story unfolding. The bobcat returns, watching her from the shadows, and Emily wonders, what's this animal's life really like out there? Something tells her this is just the start of something extraordinary. Emily's mornings had taken on a new rhythm, one that revolved around her elusive bobcat visitor. Each dawn, she'd shuffle out to her porch in the Blue Ridge Mountains, her fuzzy slippers crunching on the frost-kissed leaves, scanning the tree line for that familiar flash of fur. The bobcat, sleek and cautious, had become a regular, slipping out of the forest to nibble at the food Emily left at the clearing's edge. It wasn't just a random animal dropping by for a snack, though. Emily could feel a story brewing, something deeper than a simple feeding routine. The humane bobcat's amber eyes held a quiet intelligence, like it was sizing her up, deciding if she was worth trusting. And trust? Well, that's a tricky thing to earn with a wild creature, isn't it? Emily kept her distance, respecting the invisible line between them. But she couldn't help but grin when the bobcat would pause, mid-bite, to shoot her a look that seemed to say, "Not bad, human." Then, one chilly morning, Emily noticed something new. Tiny paw prints scattered alongside the bobcat's larger, tracks in the frosty mud. Her heart did a little flip. This wasn't just a lone wanderer. This was a mother. Somewhere out there, hidden in the tangle of pines and frost, was a kitten relying on this fierce, skinny bobcat to survive. The discovery hit Emily like a ton of bricks. She wasn't just feeding one animal now. She was part of something bigger, something fragile. Her photographer's eye caught every detail. The way the bobcat's ears twitched at the slightest sound, the way she'd glance back into the forest, as if checking on someone unseen. Emily's mind raced with questions. Where was this kitten? Was it safe? The Blue Ridge winters were no joke. Biting winds, snow that could bury a trail in hours. The thought of a tiny creature out there, shivering, tugged at her heart. As the days grew shorter and the air sharper, the bobcat's visits became more predictable. She'd show up like clockwork, her movements less skittish, her gaze lingering on Emily a bit longer each time. It was like they'd struck an unspoken deal, food for a flicker of connection. Emily, who'd traded corporate boardrooms for the wild's quiet chaos, felt a spark of purpose she hadn't known she was missing. This wasn't just about snapping photos anymore. It was about being part of this animal's story. But winter was closing in fast, and Emily knew the forest could be unforgiving. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, she got to work. With a hammer, some spare wood, and a whole lot of determination, she built a simple shelter at the edge of the clearing. Just a lean-to, nothing fancy, but enough to shield a small family from the worst of the cold. She stepped back, hands on her hips, and chuckled to herself. Well, if this doesn't scream welcome, I don't know what does. The bobcat didn't touch the shelter right away, but Emily caught her sniffing around it one morning, her tail flicking like she was giving it a 5-star review. The trust was growing, and so was Emily's worry for that unseen kitten. She'd lie awake at night, wondering how they were holding up out there. Little did she know, The Bobcat was about to bring her story right to Emily's doorstep in a way she never could have imagined. The Blue Ridge Mountains had a way of throwing curveballs, and Emily was about to catch a big one. Winter had clamped down hard, with a storm that roared through the foothills like it had a personal vendetta. Trees groaned under blankets of snow, and the wind howled like a pack of wolves. Emily, bundled up in her cabin, spent the night worrying about her Bobcat friend and that mysterious kitten she'd never seen. The food she'd left at the clearing was probably buried under a foot of white by now, and the little shelter she'd built? Well, she hoped it was holding up better than her nerves. This wasn't just some animal out there. It was a mother fighting for her baby, and that story had woven itself into Emily's heart like a stubborn thread. The morning after the storm, the world outside was a glittering mess, snow piled high, icicles dangling like chandeliers. Emily was shoveling her porch, muttering about how she should have stayed in the city, when she froze mid-scoop. There, at the edge of her porch, stood the Bobcat. Not at the usual forest line, but right there, bold as brass, her amber eyes locked on Emily. In her mouth, dangling limply, was a tiny snow-dusted kitten. Emily's breath caught. This wasn't a casual visit. This was a plea. The Bobcat didn't growl or hiss, just stood there, her gaze steady but desperate, like she was saying, "You're my last shot, human." The kitten, barely bigger than a pine cone, wasn't moving much, its little body curled tight. Emily's heart pounded. This was no time for her usual keep your distance rule. This was a rescue mission, plain and simple. She dropped the shovel, her mind racing. She'd photographed plenty of wild animals, but playing hero to a Bobcat family? That was a new one. The mother Bobcat set the kitten down gently on the porch, stepping back, but never taking her eyes off Emily. It was like she'd sized her up and decided, "You'll do." Emily crouched slowly, her breath fogging in the icy air, and saw the kitten's leg, twisted at an angle that made her stomach lurch. "Oh, buddy," she whispered. "What happened to you?" The mother stayed close, her tail twitching, but didn't lunge or snarl. It was the kind of trust that felt like a punch to the gut, raw, real, and heavy with responsibility. Emily knew she was out of her depth. This wasn't a scraped knee or a hungry stray. This was a wild animal's life in her hands. She grabbed her phone, hands shaking, and called the only person she could think of, a wildlife biologist she'd met at a photography workshop. "I've got a situation," she said, trying to sound calmer than she felt. The biologist's voice was steady, guiding her like a lighthouse in a storm. "Keep the kitten warm, don't stress the mother, and get them help ASAP." Emily grabbed a blanket, gently scooping up the tiny bundle while the Bobcat watched, unblinking. "Hang in there, little guy," she murmured, her voice cracking. She glanced at the mother, who hadn't budged, like she was rooting for this crazy human to pull through. As Emily prepared to make a move, the weight of the moment hit her. This wasn't just about saving one kitten, it was about stepping into a story bigger than herself. What would it take to give this little one a fighting chance? Emily's old Jeep bounced along the snowy roads of North Carolina, the tiny Bobcat kitten wrapped in a blanket on the passenger seat. She'd named him Leo, a nod to his fierce little spirit, though right now he looked more like a soggy cotton ball than a king of the wild. The mother Bobcat had stayed behind, her amber eyes burning into Emily's as she'd driven off, like she was saying, "Don't mess this up, human." Emily gripped the wheel, her heart a mix of hope and panic. This wasn't just another day in her wildlife photography gig. This was a rescue mission, a story that had her in way over her head. 3 hours to the nearest wildlife rehabilitation center felt like an eternity, especially with Leo's faint whimpers breaking the silence. "Hang on, buddy," she muttered, glancing at him. "We're gonna get you fixed up." The rehab center was a flurry of controlled chaos. Vets in scrubs, cages with chattering birds, and a faint smell of antiseptic. Emily handed Leo over to Dr. Carter, the head vet, who didn't mince words. "Leg's broken bad," he said, peering at the kitten's twisted limb. "Hypothermia's set in and he's malnourished. You got him here just in time." Emily's stomach nodded. She'd seen plenty of animals in her lens. Foxes, deer, even a bear once. But seeing Leo, barely bigger than her hand, hooked up to IVs and a tiny heating pad, hit different. She caught herself chuckling nervously. "Well, Leo, you're getting the VIP treatment now." The vet shot her a look, but she swore she saw a smirk. Humor was her only defense against the worry gnawing at her. Days turned into weeks, and Emily made the trek to the center whenever she could, juggling her photography gigs with check-ins on Leo. The little guy was a fighter, chowing down on special formula, his eyes growing brighter each visit. But Dr. Carter wasn't all sunshine. "He's doing better, but the leg's a problem," he told her one frosty afternoon. "Too much human contact during recovery might make him too tame for the wild." Emily's heart sank. The wild was Leo's birthright, wasn't it? The idea of this scrappy kitten never bounding through the Blue Ridge pines again felt wrong, like a story cut short. She leaned against the center's wall, staring at Leo as he batted weakly at a toy. "What's your next chapter, little man?" she whispered. The staff marveled at Leo's spunk. He'd hiss at needles one minute, then curl up purring the next, like he was auditioning for both tough guy and lap cat. Emily couldn't help but grin at his antics, but the question of his future loomed large. Could he ever go back to the forest, to his mother? Or was his path about to take a different turn? Dr. Carter mentioned options, permanent care, maybe a sanctuary. But Emily's mind kept drifting back to that mother bobcat, waiting somewhere in the snowy woods. She'd trusted Emily with her kitten, and that trust felt like a promise she had to keep. As she drove home one evening, the mountains glowing, under a pink sunset, Emily started to wonder if this rescue wasn't just about Leo. It was about her, too, and what she was willing to do to make things right. Emily's cabin felt quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat. Leo was still at the rehab center, fighting his way back from a busted leg and a rough start. But the news from Dr. Carter had hit like a cold gust off the Blue Ridge peaks. "Leo's not going back to the wild," he'd said, his voice gentle but firm. "Too much human contact. He'd never survive out there now." Emily stared at her coffee mug, the steam curling like a question mark. This little bobcat, this scrappy piece of her daily story, wasn't just an animal anymore. He was family. But what did that mean for his mother? Still out there in the pines? Probably wondering where her kitten had gone. Emily's heart twisted. She'd started this whole thing with a few scraps of food, and now she was neck deep in a rescue that felt bigger than her. She wasn't one to sit still, though. Back in her corporate days, she'd tackled problems with spreadsheets and grit. Now, it was time to channel that energy into something wilder. "All right, Leo," she muttered to herself, pacing her porch. "Let's figure this out." She dove into research, burning through coffee and late nights to learn what it took to become a licensed wildlife caretaker. It wasn't easy. Paperwork, inspections, and a whole lot of rules. But Emily wasn't about to let red tape stop her from giving Leo a shot at a good life. She started building a specialized enclosure out back, hammering away under the Carolina sun, her hands blistered but her spirit stubborn. "Not bad for a city girl, huh?" she chuckled, wiping sweat from her brow as she eyed the sturdy mesh and climbing posts. It wasn't the forest, but it was a safe place for a bobcat who'd never hunt again. Months later, the day came. Leo was cleared to leave the rehab center, and Emily's Jeep rumbled back to her, cabin with a slightly bigger, much feistier kitten in tow. His eyes sparkled with that same spunk she'd seen in his mother, and when she set him in the enclosure, he bounded onto a perch like he owned the place. Emily laughed. "Easy, King. This ain't the Ritz." But the real moment came at dusk, when a familiar shadow slipped out of the forest. The mother bobcat was back, her silhouette sharp against the fading light. She approached the enclosure, slow and deliberate, her nose twitching as she caught Leo's scent. Emily held her breath, leaning against a tree, camera forgotten. Through the mesh, mother and kitten faced each other. Leo's tiny paws pressed against the barrier, the mother's eyes soft but searching. It was a reunion that needed no words, just a quiet understanding that made Emily's throat tighten. She watched them, two wild souls connected despite everything, distance, injury, and a human who'd stumbled into their story. The mother didn't stay long, but her visit felt like a nod of approval, like she was saying, "You did good, human." Emily wasn't sure what came next, but as the stars blinked on above the mountains, she knew this wasn't the end of their tale. Something bigger was still unfolding, something that would leave a mark on her forever. The Blue Ridge Mountains had a way of teaching lessons you didn't know you needed, and Emily was learning that the hard way. Months had passed since Leo settled into his enclosure, his playful pounces and sassy hisses, turning her backyard into a mini wilderness. The mother bobcat still visited, though her trips were less frequent now, like a friend who knows you're good but checks in anyway. Emily would spot her at dusk, a shadow slipping through the pines, her amber eyes glinting with something like gratitude. It was a story that started with a hungry animal and a handful of food, but it had grown into something bigger. A rescue that reshaped how Emily saw the world. She'd chuckle to herself sometimes, thinking, who knew I'd end up as a bobcat landlord? But behind the humor was a truth. This wasn't just about Leo or his mom. It was about what it meant to coexist with the wild. Emily's days were busier now, balancing her wildlife photography with her new role as Leo's caretaker. Her camera, once aimed at fleeting moments in the forest, now captured Leo's antics, chasing a leaf, napping in a sunbeam, or giving her that classic bobcat side-eye. Those photos became the heart of her third book, a collection of images and reflections on the delicate dance between humans and wild animals. She poured her heart into it, writing about the trust the mother bobcat had placed in her, a trust that felt like a gift heavier than gold. "People think the wild is all claws and teeth," she wrote, "but sometimes it's a quiet plea, a story that asks you to step up." The book wasn't just a project. It was a love letter to the mountains, to Leo, and to the mother who'd changed everything. Standing on her porch one evening, watching the sky burn orange over the peaks, Emily thought about legacy. She wasn't saving the world, not by a long shot, but she'd saved one little life. Leo, with his crooked leg and boundless spirit, was proof that even small acts could ripple outward. The mother bobcat's visits, though rarer, were a reminder that the wild didn't forget. Emily wondered what the mother felt, seeing her kitten safe but caged, no longer part of her forest world. Did she understand the rescue? Did she sense the bond they'd all forged? Emily didn't have answers, but she felt the weight of those questions every time their eyes met through the enclosure's mesh. It was a connection that defied words, a silent conversation between a human and a wild creature. As she flipped through the proofs of her book, Emily realized the real gift wasn't just Leo's survival. It was the way this whole saga had cracked her open, made her see conservation not as a buzzword, but as a daily choice. She'd traded corporate suits for muddy boots, and now she was part of something raw and real. The mountains hummed with stories like hers, encounters that blurred the line between human and animal, moments that demanded you pick a side, help or walk away. Emily had chosen to help, and that choice was still unfolding, pulling her toward a future she couldn't quite see, but couldn't wait to discover. Take a moment to let this story sink in. A wild bobcat, a desperate mother, trusted a human with her kitten's life, a choice that blurred the line between the wild and our world. What would you do if a creature like that showed up at your door, asking for help without words? Could you step up, knowing the wild doesn't always play nice? Emily's journey with Leo and his mother isn't just a tale of rescue, it's a mirror reflecting our own choices. How far would you go to protect an animal who can't thank you? Stories like these remind us that nature's not just out there, it's knocking, waiting for us to answer. If this hit you in the feels, drop a comment. Tell us what moved you most, or share your own wildlife encounter. Our channel's packed with stories that'll tug at your heart and make you see the world differently. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to never miss another tale of courage and connection.